I'm Marilyn Wilson. I'm with the League of Women Voters. I'm the Voter Service Director. And I have just a couple of announcements. We're waiting a few minutes for Alexandra Illich, who is going to be the moderator tonight, and she may be stuck in traffic, so I'm going to make an announcement or two first. Did all of you get the information that we've printed off from Vote 411 about the candidates and their answers to questions? We have copies of that if you need it. Raise your hand if you need them, and one of the members of our group will get them out to you. Okay, someone over here needs a copy. Pardon? Oh, you're out. You're going to have to share. Sorry about that. But I wanted to mention that this afternoon when I was looking over the materials, I suddenly realized that there was a page missing, that the printer, it was not my fault, I handed all 8 pages in, but the printer obviously did not print them all. So I rushed down to my computer, printed page 6, and I stapled it to the end of the packet. So the pages are numbered at the bottom, so you should be able to follow the order. Sorry about that. I don't know, Chris, do you want to say a few words of welcome? And then we're hoping that our moderator will be here shortly. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I want to take a moment and welcome you to the South Washington office complex. This is a building that used to be the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs and the National Guard. And then when they finished using it and built a brand new headquarters on the north side of town, the property deed had a reverter clause and it became the City of Lansing's property. And I said, I need to use that to run elections. So you may have noticed there's a parking lot in the back. This is where we do our election worker training. We do have a worker training going on tonight. So if you're one of our new election workers and you thought you were coming to training, you might want to get up and go to the other place. This is also a location for folks who live in the city of Lansing where you can get an absentee ballot. We open it up 30 days before every election, and we're open from 8 to 5 Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and on Wednesdays we're open from 8 until 7. So lots of opportunities for you to come in person, get your absentee ballot, take care of your voting all in one stop. So I welcome you to come back and go through the rear entrance and visit us here in the city of Lansing. I do want to thank the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, the ACLU, and Represent Us for putting on this forum. I think it's very important for voters to learn about the candidates, to get an opportunity to see the candidates speak and interact with each other. And this primary election is very important. These candidates will move forward to November, so a lot of times if you don't make your voice heard in August, your choices are limited and not always what you want them to be in November. So thank you for being here and participating in this. I look forward to seeing a lot of great questions and hope we have some great candidate interactions. And is she here yet? She's not here yet. So I guess we'll pause for a few more minutes.
This forum is being co-sponsored by the local chapters of the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, the ACLU, and Represent Us. We are all nonpartisan organizations who do not support or oppose any political party or candidate. There are 3 candidates in the Democratic Party on the ballot and 1 on the Republican ballot. The candidates on the Democratic ballot are Terry Banas. I just want to apologize beforehand if I mispronounce someone's name, and feel free to correct me. The candidates on the Democratic ballot are Terry Banas, Julie Brixey, and Penelope, you say it, Sir Nagu. Thank you very much. The candidate on the Republican ballot is George Nastas. All right, each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question and 2 minutes for closing statements. Candidates are reminded that they are to restrict their answer to their position on the question asked and not to make any personal remarks about any other candidate. Volunteers from the co-sponsoring organizations will collect the questions from audience members to take to the screeners, who may combine questions or edit them for clarity. The screeners are Todd Hall from Represent Us and Edward Forrest from the NAACP. We request that members of the audience also remain respectful of the candidates and the forum format, and that they hold their applause until the conclusion of the forum. We will now begin the question segment of our forum. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond to each question. Our timer, where's our timer? Okay, I just want to know where you are, so okay, all right. 30 seconds, I see you, I see you. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond to each question. We will begin the questions with Ms. Banas.
Okay. I think that was loud enough. Thank you very much. My name is Terry Banas, and I'm very happy to be here.
Okay, the first question, what are your thoughts on gerrymandering and voter suppression?
I am looking forward to the time when we eliminate gerrymandering in this state. There is a group called Voters Not Politicians who have very courageously been collecting signatures to put the request for an independent, I think this is a little too close, for an independent body on the ballot that would make determinations on where district lines are drawn. The reason why gerrymandering is not a good idea is because it tends to limit the kinds of representation that you get in a community, and you don't have open, vigorous debate among candidates. It is pretty much determined in many places that a primary will determine who the winner is, who emerges into the November field. And the problem is very few people turn out at primaries. I have worked in election advocacy for a good part of my life, and we have talked vigorously about the need to get involved in primaries so you can learn about candidates, and that's why one of my mottos is Primary Matters. The second part of that question, I know I only have a few seconds left, is voter suppression. I'm opposed to that. I'm opposed to any actions that make it more difficult for people and less democratic for people to be involved in the electoral process. It's essential that democracy be an active, participating system. Thank you.
Sorry, my name's Julie Brixey. Thank you for having me here. Voter suppression is something that is extremely disturbing to me. It has a really big impact on two specific populations. That is the very young voter and poor voters. And so what happens as a result of voter suppression, like ID laws that have been put into place and sometimes are called Rogers Law because of Mike Rogers' impact on them, sometimes we used to see huge numbers of young people on Michigan State University's campus and campuses all over the state sign up and register to vote and be really excited about voting when they're away at school. And now what happens? Every time they move, they have to pay to change their driver's license in order to vote. And for poor people, If you are living in poverty, are you really going to have to come up with money to change your ID again for no reason, really? We need no reason voting. We need no reason absentee voting. We need early voting. We need to make it easier to vote. We need automatic registration, and we need to end gerrymandering. Gerrymandering has been effectively put into place in many states throughout the country, and corporations and the Koch brothers have been funding it to put forth the Republican agenda. And that's something that I'm very opposed to and have volunteered for Voters Not Politicians. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate
Hi, my name is Penelope Cerniglu, and voting and voter registration is one of my passions. I directed the student voter registration drive on MSU's campus for 5 years. We registered over 5,000 students every single year, and we gave Democrats the margins they needed to win their seats in November. And young people voting really is the key. If we want to take back Michigan's House and take back our state for the Democratic Party, I realize I'm only kind of speaking to the Democrats right now, so just bear with me, but voting, because people aren't voting and they need to be voting, but it needs to be easy. If it's hard, people won't do it. We need to get people registered and then let them know when the election is and get them out there voting and to care about that. Gerrymandering, absolutely we need to end gerrymandering now. I circulated the Voters Not Politicians petition myself. My firm worked closely with the Voters Not Politicians group, and we validated all of those signatures. That was a 100% volunteer-led effort. And things like that, along with Promote the Vote, it makes no reason absentee voting, straight ticket voting, everything that makes voting easy, that is the way that we are going to take back our country. And that is the way that we are going to do things that benefit everyone. Because if we have a better balance in our legislature, in all of our governments, then we can make laws that speak to everyone. Politicians will be speaking to everyone, not just one side or the other. And thank you.
I guess it's turned on, right? Okay. My name is George Nassis. I'm pleased to be here. Got a question on gerrymandering and voter ID laws. Number one, I'm all for voter ID laws. I think to maintain the integrity of elections, you need to know who's voting and make sure a person only votes once. So, and that helps to reduce voter fraud. On the gerrymandering, I think gerrymandering is in setting up voting districts is a political process and it ought to be done by the legislature. There's a ballot initiative, I guess, for the fall on changing the way the districts are set up. I would vote against it because I think it's just an attempt by progressives to take over the state legislature and turn Michigan into having a legislature like the one in California or in Illinois, total disasters. And I don't want to see Michigan go the way of Illinois or the way of California. They're both states in big decline. Thanks.
All right, on to question 2. What is your stance on line 5? Starting with Julie Brixey.
I am trained as a scientist. I came to Michigan for the environment. I got my master's degree here in environmental toxicology and soil chemistry. And I spent the early part of my career traveling all over the state, conducting investigations and cleanups at different types of contaminated sites, including Lansing's Superfund site. So I've seen firsthand environmental disaster, and I hate to imagine our Great Lakes the victim of an environmental disaster from line 5. I have a 70-year-old house, and I've replaced almost every pipe in my house, and none of them are underwater. Line 5 is a 65-year-old pipe underwater, under the Great Lakes, a global asset that contained 23% of the world's fresh water. We have to find a solution to protect our Great Lakes. They're the third economic driver of Michigan's economy. And they deserve other protections as well, like invasive species protections. I have an idea that we should look at regulating inland lakes and waterways so that we can have better success with keeping the invasive species, not just animal invasive species like fish, but also plant invasive species out of our Great Lakes. So my position would be that Line 5 needs to be fixed, either rerouted, relined, replaced, but something has to be done with it.
Thank you. I believe, and if it were up to me, we would shut down Line 5 now, today. It has been there far too long. Our Great Lakes are in peril right now from an economic and environmental disaster that could happen any minute. So I support shutting down Line 5. The legislature can't do that, unfortunately. It would have to be the governor or the attorney general. But as a legislator, I would certainly lobby whoever is elected to do that. And I believe that our Democratic candidate nominees have pledged that they would shut down Line 5. But not only Line 5, also all of the other pipelines running under our Great Lakes need to be shut down. We don't need pipelines transporting dangerous materials underneath our Great Lakes, period. No replacing, no lining, none of that. It needs to be gone, and it needs to go another way because our Great Lakes are too important to Michigan. Furthermore, on our Great Lakes, Nestle is currently pumping out our waters and making billions of dollars for a $200 fee. And that's wrong. That's not benefiting us, the people of Michigan, and we need to stop that as well. I will make environmental protection one of my #1 priorities as a legislator if I'm elected. And that's why I've earned the endorsement of Clean Water Action. Thank you.
This is a great question and an important question. Along with roads and education, we hear about, we get questions at the doors about the condition of our drinking water and the Great Lakes. I would call for the revoking of the approvals that have been given to allow for Line 5 to exist where it does. We have done a lot of studying. The state has looked at this issue for a long time. And there are 2 studies coming out sometime this month. One is on an alternative to Line 5 that would be buried somewhere in the lake bed. The other study is a risk assessment. I think the public has strong feelings about this issue in general, and that is that our Great Lakes are part of our brand. Drinking water is a right, a human right of our population, and to continue to allow that pipeline to remain active in an area of the straits where there are huge movements of water that continually cause erosions and other problems in that pipeline, it needs to end. So I'm in favor of shutting it down, revoking the approvals that allow it, and I think what we really need is a deadline for when to do this, because otherwise the Snyder administration has not had the best record on environment. Absent its work on the energy policy back a few months ago, we've had a disaster on the Kalamazoo River, we've had a disaster in drinking water in Flint, and I don't think we can afford to take any more risks. When you look at risk-benefit, it's time to end it. Thank you.
Yeah, on Line 5, if science studies say that the line is unsafe, then it should either be updated or replaced or relocated. Our economy runs on fuel. We need to maintain the supply of fuel to support our growing economy. And of course, everybody wants to have clean water, so we need to do that. Pay attention to that too. Thanks.
What does public service mean to you?
I'm starting, I assume?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So public service, to me, has defined my entire life. I have always felt that it was my duty to serve others in the community. I've volunteered on so many things, I can't even recall all of them. I've done countless hours of pro bono work as an attorney. I volunteered at the animal shelter for hours on end. I've done public service in just so many different ways for so many programs that I can't even necessarily begin to talk about those. I mean, being an elected official is a public service, but it's also a position and something that, in a lot of cases, we get paid for. So I mean, so that's something something that I've done as a county commissioner for 6.5 years. But really, public service is when you help your neighbor, or you help someone else in need, you hear a call and you respond. And that, I think if we all do a little bit more of that, we would have a better world. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have served in public office for 14 years, and I do agree with Penelope that public services, it can represent work that you've done on behalf of the community and local government. I was a park commissioner for 10 years. I think that we were paid about $60 a meeting. It isn't something that you make a living on, but I spent lots of time working in the park system, physical labor, working, helping to write master plans, helping to take part in volunteer efforts, and other activities like that. In my family, as Penelope mentioned, that public service is something that I have grown up with. My parents had been immigrants, and I'm an immigrant. When we came to the United States, my parents, who had suffered as small children in camps as a result of the war in Poland, they taught us that if we have to appreciate democracy, we need to participate in democracy, and we need to give back, that we have been given a great privilege in living in a country where there are many rights. And public service to me means, especially in this day and age, in the days of Trump, it means being actively involved in maintaining the rights that we all should live under, so that everyone has a chance for a better life. Because if everyone has a chance for a better life, our society is improved. So all of the various things that many of us in the room do helps towards that. Public service is something that children and young people can be involved in, and it benefits us all. Thank you.
To me, public service means helping other people and providing services to other people. I've been a public servant for Meridian Township for 18 years. The past 10 years, I've been treasurer of Meridian Township, and yes, I am paid for my full-time position. I got elected at the beginning of the Great Recession, and our community went through some very tough times. We had layoffs in Meridian Township. We had foreclosures in every single neighborhood in Meridian Township, and our organization was facing some severe cutbacks. During that time, I voluntarily reduced my salary, and today, 10 years after I've been elected, I still make less money than when I was first elected in 2008. That is public service. I've helped countless residents who come in and perhaps they're paying their water bill or tax bill and they're in some dire straits. We have a community services program. I've helped raise money for that program to provide services for our residents. I've helped residents stay in their home who have been who would have faced tax foreclosure by helping them complete paperwork and comply with our application process for poverty exemption. I've raised money for the community. I've raised probably $100,000 for a variety of projects, from our wonderful libraries to scholarships for schools. And every day I remember that I am a public servant and I am serving the people, not corporations.
What does public service mean to me? First of all, I served in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam era. I was employed and I retired from the Department of Defense, where I was an analyst. I volunteer for the last 10 years at Sparrow Hospital and the Heart Center. And I also serve on the executive committee of the Ingham County GOP. As far as service look going forward, as a representative of District 69, I will represent local families, businesses, taxpayers, and investors, trying to create a better environment for business growth, for wealth creation, for job creation and wage increases, so the families could improve their standard of living. Thanks.
George, you can keep the mic, starting with you for the next question. Do you support the idea of cutting taxes? If yes, which services would you cut or eliminate?
Do I support cutting taxes? You better believe it. Right now, I had a little section here on business and individual taxes are much too high. Taxes on business earnings, the taxes that Social Security, Medicare taxes businesses pay, the real estate property taxes they pay, the workman's comp, unemployment and family income, unemployment tax, and then for families, the income tax, the alternative minimum tax, the Obamacare tax on investment income, Social Security, Medicare taxes, sales taxes, real estate property taxes, real estate transfer tax, fuel taxes. There are too many taxes and they're too damn high. Do I support cutting them? I'd like to see the income tax disappear in the state of Michigan. I'd like to see an end to taxes on income and wealth. I'd like to see us move to, I'd use the sales tax to fund essential services like police protection. I'd like to see a menu of services for people who want to support non-essential services. Just to sum up, I'm a big favor of cutting taxes. Thanks. Because it gives more money to people to spend, to invest, to pay for their family bills. I think families can spend their money a heck of a lot better than the government can spend it for them.
Okay.
Thank you. Great question, great opportunity to say this about taxes. Families can definitely spend tax dollars in other ways, but they can't build roads and they can't invest in, and they can't build schools and hire teachers and other things. There's things that society have to take care of, and that's why we have taxes, so that we could build a society that everyone can benefit from. I am in favor, I've worked in the nonprofit field. I'm the advocacy manager for the Michigan Head Start Association. I've also been a county commissioner for the last 4 years, and I chair the Human Services Committee. I've also chaired the Trails and Parks Task Force, so I've been responsible as a county official to oversee the tax responsibilities and liabilities that you all pay for. We have, when the cost of running services don't warrant it, we at the county have lower taxes. We have been authorized to field a tax for the Ingham County Health Plan, but when expanded Medicaid came into effect in Michigan, it dropped our enrollment significantly from 15,000 to about 1,100 individuals. And so we are not levying that full mill anymore, or that full half mill anymore. We've dropped it down significantly to a third of what is necessary. You don't run taxes unless you need them, but taxes are necessary to run society. Go to some third world countries and look around. Thank you. I support only the idea of cutting one kind of tax, and that would be instituting a graduated income tax, and that would mean that 80 to 83% of taxpayers would receive a small tax cut, but the remainder would receive a huge increase, and that would actually solve a lot of the revenue problems that we're facing here in Michigan. The Snyder administration has really gone very long and far, and the Republican legislature, with tax cuts. And where are we today, 7.5 years later? We've seen $3.5 billion in corporate welfare. We've seen a fundamental shift in tax burden from corporations to individuals and retirees. And are we better off for it? What happened after the Great Recession? We recovered. Who feels it? The corporations feel it in their profits. This administration has put corporate profits above people, and we have to stop that. We can't allow profits for corporations to run our state. Our state exists for the people and to provide services for our people. Personal property tax reform, the elimination of the Michigan business tax, these things have had a terrible impact on our economy. In the Snyder administration alone, we've seen $4.85 billion of diversion from the school aid fund. So how do we feel about that? Our children's education is being rated to balance the budgets because of the corporate tax breaks.
Thank you. So I do not support cutting taxes, except for those who are in poverty and those who can afford them the least. In fact, if you are someone who can afford it, I pledge to raise your taxes and fix your roads, because this needs to happen. If you're a corporation owner, if you own a business, I own a business. I myself am a small business owner, and I do not believe that my taxes are too high. I would like to pay for good roads. I would like to pay for a good public education system in Michigan, because if we don't have good roads, if we don't have good infrastructure and good education, this is not a state that is going to be economically prosperous. We need services like that, and in order to have those services, we need taxes. And I would not cut taxes on corporations. I would not cut taxes on the wealthiest in our society. People all across my district have told me I would pay a little bit more if we could just get our roads fixed. So, thank you.
Next question, starting with Terry. What is your position regarding Emergency Manager Act, the Emergency Manager Act?
Thank you. I think it's been a dismal failure in our state. Just take a look at what happened in Flint. We have a society that's based on democratic representation, where local communities decide who represents them. When you have an emergency manager who comes in that doesn't have relationships with the community, that doesn't have institutional knowledge of the community, that doesn't understand the values of the community, you don't have that democratic representation that you need. I am in favor of different levels of government supporting one another and helping them in times of stress and in times of difficulties, in terms of providing additional professional development and support services and that sort of thing. But when you bring somebody in who makes decisions for a community and then leaves a mess like what happened in the city of Flint, where I lived for 5 years, then emergency managers are just not, that is something that I would definitely not support. And thank you.
So I would be really excited to repeal the Emergency Manager Act, and for several different reasons. One is that this is something, as has been mentioned, that really works against the democratic process. And what do we have now? We typically see the emergency managers in urban areas, which are democratic areas, and the administration is Republican, and they're placing perhaps Republicans in democratically elected areas. That's wrong. That shouldn't be that way. Why is this important? Why is the Emergency Manager Act important? Because our cities are in crisis right now. As a result of the state's disinvestment in local government, we're going to see many, many urban areas fail over the next 5 years as a result of their unfunded pension liabilities and other economic troubles that are really being brought out by the state's disinvestment in local government. Michigan ranks dead last in the nation in terms of revenue sharing to local units of government. Revenue sharing is local units of government, little tiny slice of sales tax. And not only is Michigan dead last, we're the only state in the nation that cut its revenue sharing to local units of government. It's no wonder that our communities are suffering as a result of this. Last year, Meridian Township was at 1999 levels of revenue sharing, and it's a significant source of revenue that cities and municipalities and counties operate on.
Thank you. So I also would repeal the Emergency Manager Act. I agree with everything that Terry and Julie just said about it. I think that if the state restored revenue sharing, we may not need this, and we don't need it, and we shouldn't have it. That's really all I have to say about it, but I'm going to cheat a little bit, because I thought of a tax I do want to repeal. I want to repeal the pension tax, because that is an unfair burden on our retirees. And thank you.
Why is there an Emergency Manager Act? Why are there emergency managers? Because local government has failed. They failed in their fiscal responsibility to run a sound government where they balance the cost of services against the revenue. You know, if they're running a huge deficit, something has to be done. Perhaps there are better alternatives than the Emergency Manager Act. But if these people can't run a balanced budget, then they need to go and somebody else needs to take over and run the thing so it's a sound business operation. Thanks.
Starting with Julie. Education is a high priority for many here, and more funding is often recommended. Where or how can that funding be found?
Well, education is really near and dear to my heart. This is one of my most passionate issues. So where can we find the funding? Guess what? It's already here. And this year, the governor just signed a budget for starting in October that takes a record-setting $908 million out of the school aid fund. So we have to stop this practice of raiding the school aid fund. $4.85 billion has already been taken away from the school aid fund during this administration. Not only that, we need to reform Proposal A and the Headley Amendment. We need to work on the Headley Amendment. We've got these two different things working against each other that make it very, very difficult for our schools to succeed. You know, public education exists for everyone, and it's our duty as a state to provide the education for every child to what they need. If we have children that lack resources at home, we need to provide extra resources for those children. We don't need to punitively take money away from school districts that are the poorest school district with the most disadvantaged children. They need extra resources, and they need buildings. They're forced to learn in terrible conditions because the property values are so low that even if they were to put a tax out for new buildings, they'd have to have a tax that would be 10 times higher than what we're paying in the 69th district.
Thank you. Julie is absolutely right. The school funding formula right now is just completely wrong. We're expecting children from communities that don't have the kind of support that they need to excel and meet testing guidelines. And then when they don't, we give them less funding, as if somehow that would somehow make them be able to pass this test. I can't see any logic in that. We need to have it structured so that schools that need funding the most can get funding, so that they can get universal preschool, they can get those early learning opportunities so that all kids are ready to start first grade, and that by third grade, they can read on a third grade level. Our education system here in Michigan has just gone to almost an all-time low right now, and we need to turn that around because that benefits everyone in our state. We're taking public dollars and we're diverting them to charter schools, to for-profit charter schools, and this is wrong. We should be keeping it for our public schools. We are also giving it to cyber schools, and we're not treating our teachers with respect. We're not treating them as the professionals that they are, as well as the support staff, and that needs to change as well. We need to support our teachers, and we need to support our public schools. As far as the funding goes, I apologize, I didn't get to that part. Too many corporate tax breaks. There's billions of dollars there, and we need to invest it in our children and in our future, because ultimately that is the one thing that matters most. Thank you.
During the recession, I left my job as a newspaper reporter, and I went to school to earn a teaching certificate. I taught at Everett High School for about 2.5 years until I was recruited to work in child advocacy at the state level, which I've done for the last 12 years. So I have teaching experience. I don't think anybody else at this table has been in a classroom or been responsible for 156 students and had very limited resources to help them with. No additional aid, no additional resources to help them, and spending every minute you could throughout the day and in the evening to adjust when children needed specific help. So one of the things that is a fact, based on a recent study that was done 1.5 years ago, was commissioned by both the state legislature and the Snyder administration. It was called the School Finance Research Collaborative Study, and what it found is that Michigan has been underfunding its schools significantly for about a decade. It costs, based on the standards that we set for our students, it costs over $9,000 a year to educate a student, and for a preschool age student, it's over $12,000. We are between $1,000 and $2,000 underfunding each child in Michigan, and we are at the bottom across the country. This is a sad state on our society, and this is something that I would work to reverse as a legislator in the Michigan legislature.
This is a different approach. First of all, as far as education funding goes, I'd look at the budgets for the local school districts and where they're spending their money. I'd look at the retirement and compensation packages for the employees. Take a look at what the superintendents and the administrators are making in terms of retirement pay. It's grossly out of line with what it should be. They get a 3% annual inflation adjustment to their pensions. Private sector pensions aren't that generous. They don't need to have 3% adjustment every year. I'd look at the number of non-teaching staff, and I'm not talking about the secretary. I'm talking about all these administrators and their big pay packages. You could probably cut 50% of them and get rid of them. I'd look at the number of contact hours of the teachers and the students and make it more productive. I have a couple granddaughters in public school, and the mother is saying, you know, why do these kids always have these days off where these teachers are having these meetings? You know, they should be teaching. And I'd take a look at, well, that's good. Thanks.
Next question, starting with Penelope. This is a two-part question. Do you support raising the age from 17 to 18 years for law violators and considering 17-year-olds as juvenile offenders rather than sending them to prison?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I absolutely support this. I myself have done a lot of work representing juveniles in our system as well as adults. And there are many criminal justice reforms that we need to enact. And those are two of the foremost that I believe that we should be doing. There's other things as well. We really need to reform our sentencing guidelines and our parole and the things are kind of slipping my mind right now, but there's so much that we need to do. We have a problem with over-incarceration in Michigan. We have a direct pipeline to the prisons right now from some of our lower income communities. And that needs to change. That needs to change with education, and that needs to change with meaningful criminal justice reforms. And that is something that I would personally take on and lead on in the legislature. I've earned endorsements from the Justice voters and the Coalition of Justice Voters because of my passion for that work. Thank you.
So the Raise the Age movement is going strong right now. There's a big attempt to influence legislators to turn that around. When I worked for a nonprofit a few years back called Michigan's Children, and when I worked for that organization, I was part of the Raise the Age movement. We brought individuals, we brought young people to the state capitol to tell their stories to the lawmakers who have authority over these decisions. And what we found is that, and we know from people who study children and youth and decision making, that the human brain does not fully develop until about age 25. So when you talk about the crimes or the problems that youth can cause at a young age, they're not always fully aware of what they're doing. To turn that around, you need the kinds of in-community juvenile justice programs that we have in Ingham County, which is one of the premier programs across the country and has been studied across the state. Penelope's familiar with this. I think she served on law and courts, and I currently serve on law and courts at the county level. So I think if we're talking about punishing, you would punish someone greatly by putting them in an adult prison. If you want them to turn their lives around, then they need different kinds of services and help, and that comes from the kinds of services that we get right at the Ingham Family Health Center, Ingham Family Center, which is nearby. Thank you.
We absolutely need to raise the age and treat 17-year-olds as juvenile offenders. One of the problems that we have is that members of the African American community are 5 times more likely to be incarcerated than members of the white community. And prison populations are comprised 34% of African Americans, yet they only represent 12% of our general population. That's wrong. People are wrongfully being incarcerated. We need to address this before we get to that point. We need to have police forces that reflect the diversity of our community. In Meridian Township, one of the things that we've done after being frustrated at our inability to recruit African American police officers because our pension offerings are not as generous as other communities nearby, which has a big impact on recruitment of quality people. One of the things that we did was we sponsored a cadet to go to school to get training. So I think we should create a statewide program that does a similar thing, because it's really important for our police community to match our regular community. Whatever community we have, our people working in the government should reflect that community. Another thing is that we need to, if the marijuana legalization passes, we need to release all of the people who have been wrongfully incarcerated as a result of that.
George?
How many people here could have done something and ended up in prison as a young person? I mean, that's probably a fair number of us. Maybe all of us are saints, but I kind of doubt it. We do have some saints here. That's very good. Prison's very expensive, and it's not a very, I suspect, not a very pleasant experience. And I suspect that if young people end up in prison, they're going to come out a worse person rather than a better person. So I think that we need to have as many diversion kinds of programs as possible, because each person is important. I mean, each person is granted life by God, and we want to, they ought to be able to pursue life and have a good life. And if we can, every person we can salvage and put on the right track is a very beneficial thing. So I would support all these the diversion programs and keeping people out of prison, and respecting these people and giving them some dignity and an opportunity to improve their lives. Thanks.
And George, you can keep the microphone. For the last question, what legislation would you support to reduce gun violence in Michigan, and what would it be?
Gun violence is a big problem. We have, unfortunately, some gun-free free zones, which I would call free fire zones. I think that the Constitution, the Second Amendment, says we have the right to carry and bear arms. I think that folks ought to be able to have concealed carry or open carry just about anywhere. I remember sitting on a panel a couple of years ago, and the current mayor was, I think, had a position against firearms in schools or something like that. And I said, well, how'd that work out in Sandy Hook? Not very well. I think people ought to be able to protect themselves, and the schools ought to be able to protect. Obviously, you want to have secure doors and all that kind of thing, but the biggest deterrent to firearms crimes is a firearm. You know, you've got to be able to protect yourself. If you think you can throw flowers at a criminal and stop him from doing what he wants to do, it's very naive. Thanks.
There was a story in one of the papers the other day about a buyback program that was initiated by a nonprofit organization in the city of Detroit. It was very successful. They bought a bunch of these guns back from private gun owners, and they were going to melt it down and make these use the product and create art objects out of it. One of the things that Australia had started a gun buyback program when it cleaned up its problems some time ago, and that's something that I would do. I would also eliminate the legality of automatic weapons, which are only created for one purpose and one purpose only, for mass murder. And there is no legitimate reason to own a weapon like that, and it is a horrible thing that has caused terrible, terrible tragedies across our country. I was serving on a panel recently at the University of Oakland University, and there were a group of teachers in the room, master level teachers, and they were frightened to death of working in the schools and dealing with the anxiety that their students face every day because of worrisome mass violence caused by automatic weapons and other kinds of weapons of destruction. So I would take a hard line on those products, not things that involve hunting, rifles for hunting, but certainly universal background checks and all the other known common sense gun reform actions. Thank you.
I would probably be willing to support more legislation than would ever possibly pass, because I think that the Second Amendment has really been misinterpreted, and I would interpret it in a radically different method. I think that what we need is red flag rules. We need to have gun-free zones. We need universal background checks. We need to enforce our mental health record compliance. We need to prevent domestic abusers from being able to purchase weapons. We need to close the open carry rule. We need to have child access laws. We need a lot more laws than what we have today. I mean, we have an epidemic occurring in this country, and it is from guns. One of the things that many people do not appreciate is that simply having a gun in your home means that you are going to be much more likely to die from a gun. And one of the saddest parts about access to guns is that people who are suffering from mental illness may have a severe depressive event, and they may have a fleeting feeling that they want to take their life. And if they have access to a gun, they can act on that. If we have better gun control laws in communities that have better gun control laws, one of the immediate effects is that suicide rates by gun drop dramatically. And that's something that everyone can benefit from.
Thank you. So if I am elected, I will introduce legislation to regulate guns like automobiles. This is probably about as extreme as you can go on gun control. And I get that. I've had some people say, I really like that you want to do some gun violence legislation, but what about this situation? And what about my grandfather's hunting rifle? And what about that situation? And that's fine. That's, I'm open to listening to all of those things, but I want to start with regulating like automobiles, and then we can go from there and talk about all of those other possibilities. That means every gun is registered, every gun has insurance, and every gun owner is trained and retrained. I also support everything that Terry and Julie suggested. I'm tired of hearing legislators say, oh, it's not the guns, it's the people, it's the mental health issues, and then have those same lawmakers turn around and not fund mental health. They won't fund mental health, they won't enact gun violence legislation. Well, they're not solving the problem, and we need someone who will solve the problem. Thank you.
All right, moving on to closing statements. A lot of good questions and answers. You each will have 2 minutes. Julie, I guess we'll start with you.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. I'm really impressed with the quality of work that all of the sponsors put forth for our voters to be educated. I'm really passionate about education and the environment. I've been on the Meridian Township Board for 18 years, and in that time I've seen firsthand how important schools are for the health of our community and for the health of our neighborhoods. When we have good schools, good neighborhood schools, we have healthy communities. And sadly, in Michigan today, not every child has the same access to a quality education. In the 69th district, we have some of the best schools in the state, but that isn't provided to every child in Michigan, and that's something that really needs to be changed. We're failing our youth. We're failing our youngest generation. We're saddling an entire generation with staggering debt just for the privilege of going to college. This is something that's really wrong and that needs to be changed. I feel very passionate about this issue for a variety of reasons. One is my parents were both teachers, so I was raised in a teacher household. I married a teacher, and my youngest daughter just became a teacher. So education's really personal for me. But for my husband is an American education success story. He's the youngest of 10 children, and he was raised on a poor dairy farm. And his parents did not value education. In fact, his father was illiterate. When my husband graduated from high school, his dad learned how to sign his name instead of an X, and he was 60 years old. And yet, because of his second grade teacher, my husband went on to college because he wanted to become a teacher. He got an associate's degree, he got a bachelor's degree, he got a master's degree, and now he is a full professor at Michigan State University. We need every child's full potential to be realized.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the League of Women Voters, NAACP, ACLU, and Represent Us for hosting this forum, as well as the other candidates for this engaging conversation, and all of you here for coming to listen to us tonight. Every election here, we hear people say this is going to be the most important election of our lives. Well, I truly believe that this year in November, this may be the most important election of our lives. After years of enduring an extreme Republican agenda in our legislature, from things like rape insurance to guns in daycare to Citizens United on steroids, as well as everything that is happening in our nation's capital, we need lawmakers with real-world experience who can make a real difference in people's lives and put us back on the right course. We need lawmakers who have a realistic chance of taking back the Michigan House so we can legislate our progressive values. We don't need politicians who say one thing and then do another. We don't need politicians who owe favors to special interests. We need lawmakers who will uplift and promote and work for the underserved and the voiceless in our communities. I have spent my entire life advocating for and uplifting people in need and doing and fighting for what's right. I worked as a domestic violence, thank you. I worked as an advocate for domestic violence survivors. I worked as an attorney for juveniles and adults who could not afford representation. I'm now a small business owner. I have been a leader on campaigns for clean water, health care, and working families. And I want to bring my extensive experience organizing and advocating for people to work with you to first take back our Michigan House and then, thank you, work for the people. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been stated, but thank you very much to the organizers, and thank you to the audience for being here today. I'm very pleased to see so many people here, and as I talk to folks at the doors, there is a great enthusiasm and movement in this election, and I think that's very important and necessary. Why would I want to be a representative in the state legislature at this time? I have had a very full career. I've served as a journalist for 17 years. I covered City Hall in Flint. I covered Wayne County government. I covered business for the Lansing State Journal during the Hollister years in downtown development. I also worked as an educator at Everett High School and also at Meridian Alternative High School, which has since closed. And I have worked as a child and family advocate for 12 years. I worked for on the legislative side, on the state side, for 10 of those years. I worked on a lot of the issues that lawmakers are involved with today. I was part of the Expand Medicaid Coalition. I was part of the Proposal 1 movement. Our organization was involved in that because we were very much concerned about school buses being ripped up by our roads, and that was about 6 or 7 years ago. The proposal didn't make it, but we certainly learned a lot about what it costs to fix roads, and we learned that it wasn't done under this administration. I also fought for education funding for alternative education, students who learn differently than some of us. I also fought for adult education, and I was part of the system building for early childhood education in this state. In the first 2 years of the Snyder administration, my coalition was able to achieve $140 million for early childhood, which was not an easy lift in the first 2 years of the administration. And why is that? Why do I bring that up? Because I have familiarity working with people who make things happen. And that's why I'd like to continue on and work for you. Thank you.
Before I get to why I would make the best representative for the 69th District as a Republican, I'd like to clear up a couple of things that were said earlier. One, the AR-15, for example, is not an automatic weapon. It is a semi-automatic weapon. Okay, it's not an automatic weapon. Number two, businesses don't pay taxes. They've never paid taxes. They collect taxes. And who do they collect taxes from? They collect taxes from consumers and higher prices, from workers and lower wages, and from investors and lower returns. If an investor is going to make a lower return because of higher taxes, he's going to take his capital and he's going to put it somewhere else so he can get a competitive return. Businesses do not pay taxes. They collect taxes from individuals. Getting on to why I'll be the best representative, first thing I would work to do is undo progressive legislation. I think it's detrimental to Michigan residents. I work to reduce the influence of special interests and their lobbyists. Why do we have such high automobile insurance? I'm a senior. I've got Medicare. I've got supplemental insurance, as many of you do. Why the heck do you have to pay for medical insurance in your automobile policies? You can cut your rate by 30, 40% by getting rid of the PIP and the catastrophic coverage. Why do we have it? Because the legislature is under control of special interest and lobbyists. That needs to change. As I said earlier, I'd eliminate taxes on income and wealth. I'd eliminate income and wealth redistribution. I'd improve the roads by improving their funding by reallocating the capital that's collected through the sales tax to roads. I put that as a #1 priority. I'd require defined benefit or defined contribution programs for all taxpayer-paid employees. I'd get rid of every single defined benefit plan. I'd eliminate the double dipping that goes on with the pensions. I wouldn't let the roll in overtime pay or vacation pay and all this other baloney to spike up the pensions. It's totally wrong. It doesn't happen in the private sector, and it shouldn't happen in the public sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this concludes the candidate forum for the 69th House District. Let's give our candidates a quick round of applause. And the League of Women Voters, ACLU, NAACP, and Represent Us would like to thank the candidates for their participation and for the City of Lansing for the use of this site and for their hospitality. And if you guys want more information about the candidates, you can go to a couple websites, www.vote411.org, or you can visit another website, lwvmi.org. And don't forget to vote on August 7th. Thank you. Okay, well, welcome everyone to the forum featuring candidates running for the 68th District House seat in the primary election on August 7th. My name is Alexandra Illich. I am a reporter / weekend anchor at Channel 6. This forum is being co-sponsored by the local chapters of the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, the ACLU, and Represent Us. They are all nonpartisan organizations who do not support or oppose any political party or candidate. There are 7 candidates in the Democratic Party on the ballot, 1 for the Republican ballot and 1 for the Green Party. The candidates on the Democratic ballot are Sarah Anthony, Grant Bradley, Kelly Collison, Paul DeWeese, Eric Nelson, and Farhan Sheikh Omar. And the candidate on the Republican ballot is Rosalinda Hernandez. The Green Party candidate is Robin Lorraine. Mr. Gwynns, I hope I'm not mispronouncing that, he did not respond to the invitation for tonight. Okay. So here are the rules of the game. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question and 2 minutes for closing statements. Candidates are reminded that they are to restrict their answer to their position on the question asked and not to make any personal remarks about any other candidate. Can you guys do that? Okay. Let's see here. Volunteers from the co-sponsoring organizations will collect the questions from audience members to take to the screeners who can combine the questions, and I'm reading off directions for myself. So I don't need to say that. All right, so members of the audience, please just be sure to remain respectful of the candidates and the forum format, and please hold your applause until the end. All right, so we're going to begin the question segment. Once again, you guys have 1.5 minutes to respond to each question. Our lovely man over here is going to be holding up a sign that will indicate how much time you have left, so please just pay attention to that so we can be respectful of time. Okay, starting first with Ms. Hernandez. What is your plan to increase local economics?
Thank you for this opportunity. Well, personally, I forgot. We can't go personally. Economically, I believe we need to build our businesses. Our businesses need the support, I believe, on a state and a local level. They need to know that we want them to not only bring revenue in to our state, but also that we support them at a legislative state. Part of the problem that happens with the businesses is that they do get levied with a lot of fees. They get levied with things that make it a burdensome for them to even open a business. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever opened a business, but it takes money, effort, and time. And I believe that the businesses need to be supported by us and the legislation to help them to better our city and our state. I believe that there's the leasing and the rates for them to lease buildings in our state and city should be less than what they're charged. I believe that it's too high. I believe they're paying way too much. They have to pay not only just inventory, they have to pay for employees, but they also have to pay a high fee for rates. So I believe that the rate should be reduced. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, and this is an excellent question. I was born and raised in Lansing, and for the past decade and a half, I've been really working to improve the neighborhood conditions as well as our local economy. I think our local economy can be stronger with two different approaches, right? One, ensuring that we have investing into small and mid-sized businesses. I've been endorsed by the Lansing Regional Chamber of Commerce as well as the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce because of my support of local businesses, right? We want to make sure that we have an economy that is attractive and that is conducive for folks to open up businesses. We have so many young entrepreneurs in the city of Lansing and across the region, and so making it attainable for them to actually start businesses. But we also want to be investing in our talent. So in addition to being supported by the Chambers of Commerce, I also have been I've also been endorsed by the various labor groups. So everyone from the UAW to the Michigan AFL-CIO, because we do not have a strong local economy without strong workforce. So making sure that folks are have a living wage and that we are investing in talent. So making sure that our individuals have skilled trades and technical certificates in order to fill the jobs that we hope to have in our economy.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Thank you to everyone that is hosting this, and I'm really excited that we have a lot of people here and excited for the elections coming up. So our plan to increase local economics, first of all, we need to lower taxes on small businesses. Small businesses are the heart and core of any local economy. We do need to increase taxes on large corporations. These large corporations have been living off the backs of ordinary workers who are underpaid and overworked. And with that, we need to increase the minimum wage to a living wage of at least $15 an hour tied to inflation to ensure that every person has a decent standard of living. And with that, we also need to encourage co-ops. A lot of people talk about unions, a lot of people talk about the local workforce, but we forget that co-ops are one of the stronger business models in our society, and we need to push towards encouraging more co-ops in the Lansing area and across the state of Michigan, and make sure that people are staying here after they graduate, not just getting an education and leaving to areas that are better for have stronger economies. We need to build that strong economy here in Michigan.
First of all, I just want to thank you for sponsoring this, and thank you all for taking the time to come out as candidates. I'm sure all of us feel the same way, that it energizes us, it empowers us when we know that there's citizen input and citizen activism. In terms of the local economy, our national economy is growing quite rapidly right now. Michigan's economy is growing. Where my focus is, is not just in terms of increasing the number of jobs, but it is increasing the number of jobs that make it worthwhile for people to labor. All people have dignity, and that means their labor has dignity. So our public policy needs to support and strengthen living wages. So we need to increase the minimum wage and the earned income tax credit. We also need to work with our community colleges and building trades to help young people acquire the skills they need for this information technological age. Thank you.
Good evening. I would like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. As far as increasing our economy, I believe everything starts with infrastructure. No one will invest in our city if infrastructure is not there. So the first thing we need to do is invest in our infrastructure, get that up to date. Second, we need to invest more in our local businesses. That means eliminating this idea of go big or go home. Instead of building a casino, we could be helping out our local businesses. We need to keep talent in Michigan, especially in Lansing. We need to also increase minimum wage to $15 an hour. Thank you.
My name is Robin Lorraine, and I'd like to thank the National Organization of Women Voters for inviting me. I'm not in the booklet that you all have because the Green Party already nominated me, so we don't primary. You can vote for me in November. I'll be on that ballot. And how I would help the district become economically better is, for one thing, businesses are not going to want to live here if our schools aren't improved. We have some real issues with struggling schools. I would do everything I could to bring those schools up to par. Another thing is our infrastructure, our roads. I've been here for over 20-some years, and the roads have been an issue all that time. There's also a lot of ideas coming out of Michigan State in Northtown, where I live. There's a hub where Michigan State couples with businesses, and they're in there and they share computers and things like that. We need to do more things like that. But I think basically is we need to make our area appealing to businesses so that they want to come here and they want to bring their workers here. I also believe that the minimum wage should be up to $15 an hour, and I think that we should get some rent control going on because a lot of people are having a hard time finding places to live that are affordable, and often there's a lot of food scarcity because families have to choose between paying the rent. Time's up. Thank you.
Okay, next question, starting with Ms. Anthony. What do you see as the biggest issues facing the 68th district?
There are so many issues. I think income inequality is one that I feel and I see every single day. As a product of Lansing, I was born and raised here. You know, there are so many people in the community that helped raise me and shape me as an individual. But I often see those same families that poured into me and invested in me struggle to make ends meet. And oftentimes, you know, your predictor of being able to attain the so-called American dream really depends on your zip code or your income level or your race and ethnicity. And so I think that income inequality is something that is really prevalent in our community. And so until we get really focused on ensuring that all of us do better by taking an equity approach and really electing policymakers from the state, local, and federal level that are going to look out for all of us and not just special interests, we will not see more of us to continue to live that dream that we all hope to. We are primarily a working middle class community. And so I think that by electing people locally and at the state level who share our values, who knows that things like prevailing wage, things like universal health care are important to the quality of life of people in Michigan and particularly people in the 68th district, we all won't do better because we'll continue to see our friends and our neighbors and our family members left behind.
Ms. Collison.
So I've been knocking on doors for the past few months, talking to voters every day, and the number one issue that comes up, besides obviously our roads, is healthcare, access to healthcare. We talk about access and affordability for healthcare, but what are we going to actually do about it? I support Michigan becoming a leader in healthcare by being the first state to implement a single-payer universal healthcare system that ensures that everyone has access to healthcare as a right, not a privilege. Additionally, we need to raise the wage. Like Sarah said, there are way too many people that are barely scraping by right now. And I would have to disagree. I don't think that we live in a middle class area. Our median income is for a household is $34,000. That's not middle class to me. That is barely scraping by working class. I've talked to 25 homeless people just walking down the street this last week, and we're not talking about the issues of the homeless right now. And I think that that's a huge issue that we tend to ignore because maybe they don't vote, or maybe they aren't giving us what they need, or they're not, serving us. The problem is that these are human beings, and we need to make sure that we are taking care of each other, not just the wealthiest among us.
I believe that several of the biggest issues facing us, number one, infrastructure. If you were a entrepreneur, job provider, and you flew into Lansing International Airport and you just drove the first mile or two on the roads, I think you'd have second thoughts about whether you'd want to create jobs here. So infrastructure is vital for everything that we do and for job creation as well. Number two, it's the hollowing out of our middle class. We have a lot of people that are working very hard, sometimes 2, perhaps 3 jobs. And that creates huge stress on our communities and huge stress on individuals and families. Number 3, the opioid crisis is affecting many people here. Everybody in this room, I'm sure, knows someone who either is addicted or has had an overdose from opioids. So this is a critical issue, and we're going about it all wrong. We've militarized that whole thing on our war on drugs, and we've, instead of seeing it as a public health issue, we've seen it as a criminal issue. And we need to move it back so we can divert money from prisons into treatment. The last one is our public education. We need to invest more. It's interesting that all of our suburban communities receive more money from the state of Michigan per pupil than Lansing does. This is a shame, it's immoral, and it's a kind of a bankrupt policy.
The first thing we need to do is invest in our infrastructure. Our infrastructure has received a D+. Whoever gave us a D+ was being very generous, because if I had to grade it, I'll give it an F. The second thing we need to do is stop slapping Band-Aids on the scars of our road and actually fix them, invest more in them. Our education ranks as one of the worst states in the country. And as an immigrant, I came here when I was 10 years old. And the only reason why I'm sitting here today is because of the education that I got when I got here. So we need to continue to invest more in our education, our kids. It shouldn't matter where they live or how much their parents make. Everyone deserves a real chance to chase their dreams, just like I have. And lastly, we need to increase minimum wage to $15 an hour. For the past 8 years, my family and I have lived in a low-income housing, and people over there are barely surviving. People have to work 2 jobs just to make ends meet, and that's not fair. So we need to increase minimum wage and help people. Thank you.
Well, I think all of the problems that we have in our district come from education. So I think it's a snowball effect. We improve education and we get our kids' reading levels up. Our kids are in 6th grade reading at a 3rd grade level, and now there's going to be a law that's going to pass that states that if kids can't read at the 3rd grade level, then 3rd grade they're going to be held back. But the state's not giving the schools the money to do that, so they're giving them this law and expecting them to do that. And this is schools in my district, like Willow is on the list. There's a lot of schools on the struggling list, and we need to get the kids up because it all comes together. They can't get jobs. They start to feel despondent. They don't feel like they're part of the community. They turn to drugs. They start doing other things. And so the Michigan Department of Education wants Michigan to be a premier state, and I want the 68th district to help Michigan become a premier state. And I think education is the first thing we need to work on, and then the other things will come in. And I think we really need to get trade schools back at the inner cities. A lot of good jobs are in the trades industry, and there's just like not, I remember when I was in school, there was wood shop, and there was home ec, and there was metal, I'm not sure what it's called, but welding. There was all those kind of jobs, and those things are open, but there's not enough people to go into those, and a lot of those jobs, minority kids aren't. My time is up. Thank you.
If we could pass the microphone down to Ms. Hernandez, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I would agree also that it is infrastructure. Paul was actually correct. When you drive into on our roads, coming from the airport, or even come from Detroit, it's a hotmess.com. We need to do more than just fix them. We need to repave them. We need to go back. We need to go underneath and fix them. at the level that they need to be fixed, because they're patching them don't work. I don't know about you, but I've had many potholes fixed in my neighborhood, and they just get repotted and they get refixed over and over. So infrastructure for sure. Secondly, education, without a doubt. The children in our state, we were ranked one of the lowest. We dropped in the rates of education. I personally believe that we need to provide funding for skilled trade workers. That's absolutely correct. We do need people to have that trade, a skill that they can take and actually earn an income, and a very good income, not just getting by. I too grew up here in the Lansing School District. I've lived here all my life, been married to my husband for 32 years. We have raised our children here, so we know that the education system needs help. And I believe that they also need to provide funding for teacher assistants, downsize the classrooms, and even provide for schooling for before and after school. Thank you.
Next question, starting with Ms. Collison. What is your opinion on sanctuary cities?
Great question. I was very disappointed when the Lansing Chamber of Commerce pushed the City Council last year to reverse their decision on making Lansing a sanctuary city. We have all of the policy that says we're a sanctuary city without the title because, to be honest, our politicians lack any form of political courage. I would like to instead go further than that and make Michigan a sanctuary state. There's absolutely no reason that anyone should be discriminated against or taken away from their homes where they're living, their families. These people are members of our community. They're our friends, they're our neighbors, some are our family members, and we need to be strong and diligent in fighting the Trump agenda and making sure that every person in Michigan feels at home and welcome here in our state. So I'd like to see Michigan become a sanctuary state.
Mr. Deweese?
Yeah. I would be supportive of having Lansing become a sanctuary city. You know, it's amazing to me that our national symbol used to be the Statue of Liberty. You know, the lady that talked about the refuse from your teeming stores. I stand beside the light to welcome you. And now our national symbol is becoming a wall. What a tragedy. Our policy regarding immigrants is unduly harsh, immorally broken, and I think in a representative kind of democracy, it's important for states and localities to stand up to wrong, immoral, bankrupt policies and make a difference and take a stand.
I am in support of Sanctuary City. I believe there is no place for hate. We should not have hate in our community. As an immigrant, as a Muslim, the words that comes out of our president's mouth is scary. And we have an opportunity to reject that in our community. I believe everyone has a chance to reject his message and to stand together and welcome everyone, just like everyone welcomed my family when we first got here in 2005. And you look at me today, I'm a good citizen. I pay my taxes. I'm running for office. So everyone deserves an opportunity.
Well, I believe Lansing should be a sanctuary city, and I was very disappointed when I found out that we weren't going to be one. As I had stated earlier, I live in Northtown. I live with so many different people. We all get along fine. We see each other at the parks. We all get along. There's no problems. My kids went to Eastern High School. 200 different languages are spoke in Lansing. You go through the halls of Eastern High School, and there's a flag from all the different countries. It's just such a good feeling, a good diverse feeling. I have a multicultural family, many different religions in my family. I'm opposed to the Muslim ban, and I just think that we need compassionate immigration, but we also need Lansing to be a sanctuary city. And I think that, I don't want to speak for anyone, but I think that the federal government, I had heard, had threatened cities that they would cut back federal funds to cities that became sanctuary cities, and I have kind of the sneaking suspicion that's why Lansing didn't become one, but I don't know that for sure, so it's just my hypotheses on that. But I really would like to see the movement go back toward that to make our district a sanctuary district. Thank you.
If you could please pass the microphone down. And Ms. Anthony, you can start, and then Ms. Hernandez.
Thank you. I'm absolutely in favor of Lansing becoming a sanctuary city because I think it reflects the diversity of our community, and that's what makes us strong. In my current role as a county commission, I was one of many of our commissioners who led the charge on making Ingham County a welcoming county. And several weeks ago, I had the honor of speaking at the Capitol in favor of keeping families together, because we know, because of the Trump administration and Republicans at the federal level, these are still issues that we continue to have to face. And so, I think that absolutely Lansing should be a sanctuary city, and I think that communities across the state should take that up as something that they should be prioritizing. And one thing that I wanted to do is lift up an example of not a city, but a community organization, in fact, a church that has taken that leap. Just yesterday, Crystal Ray Church said, we are going to become a sanctuary church, in which, and a lot of folks probably are in this room right now, that said, we are going to be a safe haven for families across our community. And so I would charge all of us, in terms of all of the organizations that we belong to, maybe our own congregations, to take that leap, because sometimes local governments and elected officials aren't ready to make that courageous stand, but we as individuals and as organizations, as part of organizations, can take that leap on behalf of families that live in our communities.
Thank you. I look at it and I see it from many different angles. But if you go back to the root of it, it's not about people not being provided sanctuary. It's not about that. It's about, and it's not even about it's not about immigration. It's about law-abiding citizens. If I break the law in my city, then there's a price to pay for that. If you break the law as an immigrant, there's a price to pay for that. I don't think that there should be any type of favoritism for someone that is not even a legal citizen in our state, that they can continue to break the law because their citizenship is not right. Well, then let's help them get citizenship. Let's help them become citizens the right way. And even being a Latina, you know that my people be crossing over. We know that they do that. But the point is they're still doing it wrong. There's a right way and there's a wrong way. So let's do it right, and let's help them do it right. Everybody does deserve a chance to come to our great state of the United States of America. But you have to do it the right way. And I don't personally think that that's illogical to say you got to do it the right way, because when it comes down to it, whether you were born here or you journeyed from afar, you must uphold the law of the land. And that goes for citizens and non-citizens. Thank you.
Next question, starting with Mr. Deweese. How do we help out our Michigan citizens with better medical, dental, and mental health issues?
Well, I think that we need to strive and aspire for universal health care. I was pleased that Michigan was one of the states that took the opportunity to broaden our Medicaid program through the Obamacare program. That Medicaid program is still, expansion is still present. So, but there's too many people falling through the cracks in our healthcare system. And so we need to strive and envision a platform, a program of universal health care for everybody. I don't understand why we can't envision even like a Michigan Medicare model, you know, beginning at 64, 63, 62, as fast as we can go, so that everybody has universal health care. Many people, as they approach 65 years of age or before that, they become disabled or they're not working. They don't have employer-provided health care anymore, and it's a scary time for many people. And that goes along with the idea of people that are on the lower end of the economic ladder. So I think we need to move towards a universal health care that would emphasize mental health, which is kind of the broken leg oftentimes of our healthcare system. We need to have a robust mental health system as part of that.
I believe in universal health care as well. Healthcare is not a privilege. It should be a right. And we need to make sure that our seniors are well taken care of. People shouldn't have to come into work sick because they don't have the health care to pay for it. We need to come up with a universal health care that also includes with pre-existing conditions. You shouldn't get punished for having pre-existing conditions. Thank you.
Well, I've been a nurse in Michigan and in other states around the country for over 30 years, and so universal health care is something that I really believe in. I also have been an advocate for mental health. A lot of people know me as the state council coordinator for the Michigan Association for Children's Mental Health Care, and then I went on to become the executive director. And early in the beginning of the 2001, I was up at the Capitol working with the Children's Caucus to try to make mental health parity be the same as if you were physically ill. So if you think about the body, if you're diabetic, your pancreas isn't working right. If you have a mental health issue, your brain's not working right. It's not a separate thing. And we need to get people thinking in those terms. We need to get people thinking in the way that substance abuse is a disease process. It's just not a character flaw. And so I think that universal health care is something that we need to strive for. And I can't figure out why it's not rocket science. Other countries do it. Other industrialized countries do it. Why can't we do it? We can't do it because we've got it in our head that it's being a socialist. And no, it's not. Medicare is about like universal health care, and we don't say that elderly people who are 65 who get it are socialists. So I think we have to reset our thinking in that. Thank you, my time's up.
If you'd please pass down to Ms. Collison. Thank you.
So healthcare should be a right, plain and simple. I, as I said before, support a single-payer healthcare system that covers everyone as a right. There are two programs that have been put out there for Michigan so far, MishCare, which Dr. Abdul Sayed, who's running for governor, had put out recently, and then MyCare, which was introduced by Representative Yusuf Rabi out of the Ann Arbor area. I was at the Capitol steps when he introduced that bill because that is one of the most important things, in my opinion, that we need here in Michigan. We need to make sure that every single person isn't going into bankruptcy. My mother filed bankruptcy a few years ago because of the enormous healthcare bills that she was facing because her husband's diabetic. He has insurance through his work. She had insurance through her work. 2 health insurances still had to file bankruptcy. Fast forward a few years, she had to take out her entire 401k to make sure that she could pay for those healthcare bills. And now she is struggling to get by. If something else happens, she has no backup. That is unacceptable in the wealthiest country in the entire world. And when it comes to dental and mental health, we need to be investing in those in the same program. When we invest in mental health, we are reducing the number of homeless people on our streets because we are making sure that we're investing in them and taking care of them and helping them. It will also reduce the number of incarcerated people.
I am very passionate about healthcare, in which I think I said a little bit earlier. And I've also been working here locally to expand healthcare access for Ingham County residents. As a county commissioner, one of the first things that I heard when I was running in 2012 is please protect the Ingham Health Plan. So before the Affordable Care Act, the Ingham County voters decided that we were going to prioritize healthcare for every resident. And so what we did is we created the Ingham Health Plan, which is essentially a healthcare product for folks who may not qualify for the Affordable Care Act. And it helps to provide access for many people across our community. But over the course of the last few years, folks have tried to dismantle that. And so I have been one of the loudest and most vigorous champions for the Hingham Health Plan. One of the things that we have been able to do through the health plan is also expand that coverage so that it includes mental health services, because we know we need to approach healthcare from a holistic perspective. So we've been able to provide additional funding with community mental health. But one thing that I have been a proponent for and a champion of is expanding healthcare by opening a brand new health clinic right in South Lansing. It's the Forest Healthcare Center. And so what that does, it expands access for folks in our community. So I have a proven track record for expanding health coverage right here in Ingham County, and I would continue to do so at the state level.
Well, first of all, we need to reduce the healthcare cost. People can't afford it because they're charging too much. Who's literally watching them? Who's telling them? You go to the hospital, they give you a Tylenol, they charge you $500 for a Tylenol. That's ludicrous. It's like somebody has to regulate them and regulate the cost that they're making us pay in insurance. My husband works, and he gets money taken out of his check every week to pay for insurance so that his family can have insurance. It costs money. So I believe they need to reduce the health care costs. Secondly, I believe they need to make it affordable. Hence the Affordable Care Act, but it needs to be affordable. They should not be allowed to charge us thousands of dollars for something that they don't even pay that. But they can gouge the citizens, and they can gouge the people. I don't think that that's right. So I think somebody should be regulating them. And thirdly, I do believe there should be a state provision. My mother raised us 5 kids on her own, and there's no way that we had insurance. We were raised on the government, and the government helped us where we did not get any help. So I do agree that the government is able to help the people, to help even senior citizens, and give them what they need. Thank you.
Next question, starting with Farhan. As a legislator, will you encourage more charter schools managed by for-profit companies? If so, can you provide examples of those schools' performance? And if not, why not?
You repeat that?
As a legislator, will you encourage more charter schools managed by for-profit companies? And if so, can you provide examples of those schools' performance? And if not, why not?
No, I wouldn't support that proposal. I believe that we should invest more in our public schools, more than we do with our charter schools, so that our kids can better benefit from that.
Absolutely not. I would never support a charter school. I think the money should go into the public schools. I think we need to listen to our Michigan Board of Education. The governor is supposed to listen to their recommendations, and I found out tonight that probably no governor since Engler has done that. I think that students shouldn't have to be suing the state because they can't read. I read an article the other day where some students in Detroit couldn't read, and they sued the state, and the judge ruled that it is not a right for kids to learn to read. So parents can get their kids taken away if they don't send them to school. And the schools can be moldy, they can be cold, they can be too hot in the summer, but the parents still have to send them or they'll get their kids taken away. But the school doesn't have to make sure they read when they leave. But then the state turns around and says, we're going to hold these kids back in the 3rd grade if they can't read, but then we're not going to give you the money to do that. It's crazy. It's crazy. So my focus would be to get every school up to where it should be and to make sure that the money gets there to do it and stop passing these ridiculous laws that are just setting the schools up for failure. If a school can't afford to heat itself and then you tell the school that doesn't have enough books, and this is really hitting the inner cities, Benton Harbor, Detroit, Flint, that's ridiculous. We're better than this, and we have to become better than this. Thank you.
I would not encourage more charter schools. I think that what's happened over time, maybe over the last 20 to 25 years, is that there's kind of a ideology, the for-profit elixir, is somehow going to be better. And so we have, for-profit prisons in Michigan, and we have for-profit prison food with maggots in the food, and we kind of turn a blind eye until it becomes so atrocious that we can't do that anymore. And so the idea that you can just siphon off profits and somehow that's going to make, as an elixir, the teaching in the classroom more effective, I think is foolish. So I would not support more for-profit charter schools.
I absolutely oppose charter schools at all. Charter schools should not be a thing. We need our public schools to be as strong as they possibly can, and there should be no reason at all that anyone is making profits off of our babies' backs. At the end of the day, I would love to shut down every charter school, but we need to start with shutting down every for-profit charter school, hands down. The DeVos agenda has got to go. It's pretty embarrassing that we are the state that gave this country to Voss. It's really awful. So we need to be vigilant in fighting back against the DeVos agenda. What we do need to do is increase our funding for schools with high poverty rates. Why is it that Okemos is one of the top schools in the state, but Lansing is struggling just to keep teachers, just to keep the students, getting the students to graduate? Because we have high poverty rates in this district. We have school of choice that allows kids to go out to other districts, so that funding is decreased because we have less pupils to fund. So instead of saying, oh, you have low test scores, we're going to give you less money, what we need to do is increase funding for areas with low test scores, increase funding for areas that have high poverty rates, increase funding for areas that have higher special needs students, and increase funding for areas where English is being learned as a second language to a lot of the students.
So my day job is working as deputy director at the Michigan College Access Network. And so it's afforded me the opportunity to help low-income students and students who would be first in their families to obtain a college degree or a skilled trade or credential connect to post-secondary opportunities. And I've been able to travel all 83 counties in that capacity. And what I will say is that it is a shame that parents don't believe they have a choice, because in many neighborhoods, there aren't high quality public or charter schools. And so they're left to really have a false choice of where can I send my student, my child, to receive a quality education. And so my perspective would be we need to be empowering public schools with all the resources they need. I mean, at the state level, there has been years of disinvestment from the school aid fund. In fact, they've been taking money from school aid and pouring into the general fund. I would be completely opposed to that, because we need to be investing more resources into our public schools. Also, in my day job, I work with data every day. And the data doesn't lie. That charter schools will often say, we are producing the best and the brightest, and if you come to our schools, we're going to transform things, and our test scores are off the charts. The reality is that doesn't pan out, that they are essentially doing just as good or bad as the public schools around the corner. So my perspective is we need to be making sure that we are empowering our schools and our teachers with the best resources so that they can empower the next generation of Michigan families.
I believe in local education. But if you think about it, why was there school of choice? Because parents were not satisfied with the education that their children were getting in the schools, in the local schools. And many people had to rise up and say, I should have the option of where I want to send my child. And anybody in here that has a child, you know that you're going to look for the best schools, the best rates, the one that has the best scores and everything. That's what you're going to look for. Any parent in their right mind would. I have 3 sons and I've raised them. You want them to be in good schools. I'm for community schools. I believe that the children should be raised in the community. I do believe in that. I also believe that parents were not satisfied with the children's grade level, so they took them somewhere else. And that's sad, because we as Lansing, we lost. So I do believe that we need to put more money into our educational system. I do believe that our public schools need that help. They do. I'm not saying that I'm for charter schools, but what I'm saying is that we as a people need to be helping our local schools. We need to help them and give them the same right and deserve, what they deserve is to have that better education. Thank you.
Next question, starting with Robin. Should there be stronger gun control?
I believe there should be stronger gun control, and I think it should be common sense. I don't think that people should own military-type weapons. I can't figure out what the use would be. You're not going to take an automatic gun out and blow a deer apart. I mean, you couldn't even eat it after that. But I do think that people that hunt should be able to have a rifle to go hunting. Why take that away? That's a big industry here in Michigan. But I also think that the people who own these guns, they have an obligation to make sure that the gun is safe, that it's out of the hands of children. And I think that we just have to have some common sense about it. I think there should also be a waiting period so that when someone goes and gets a gun, that there can be a background check to see if this person has a severe mental illness that would keep them maybe not the safest to have a gun, or perhaps even they're a felon who's out on escape or whatever, you know. So I think that there should be some kind of gun control, but I don't think it should be all or nothing. I think there should be common sense gun control, and that we should take our hunters into thought about that. Thank you.
Every day that you turn on the news, there are kids getting shot. When is it enough? Background checks are important. No one who has mental health should have access to a gun, period. And anyone who has a gun, who's a gun owner, should be held accountable when their kids decides to take their gun to go kill other children. We need tougher gun laws. We need to hold people accountable. It's not taking away their guns. No one's trying to take away guns, but we need common sense laws. Thank you.
I think that this issue is an example of feeling in our public that our government has been captured by single interests that are not in conformity with a broad public interest. I strongly believe in increased gun control. The fact that you can have a private gun show and sell guns and not be required to have background checks is unbelievable, frankly. We ought to have rules and laws against magazines that have, you know, so many bullets in them. There's been examples where a person was actually stopped. He was shooting children in school, and he had to stop to put another magazine in his gun, and at that point he was tackled. But if you have magazines that have multiple, you know, rounds of ammunition in them, that just allows more people to be killed. Things like bump stocks that move in semi-automatic to an automatic are simply wrong, and we need to outlaw those. So we as a society need to stand up to the NRA and to demand that we have common sense gun laws to protect our citizens from the kind of outrages that we've seen.
I strongly support gun reforms. I think that if we are going to require insurance on a deadly weapon like a vehicle, for example, it's not used as a weapon, but, well, I guess sometimes it could be. But it is what a lot of people die from, whether it's an accident, whether it's drunk driving. There's so many things. So we have insurance on that, right? And we pay the highest rates in the entire country, which we need to fix. But we need to have insurance on guns and on gun owners to make sure that they are held responsible for anything that happens with those guns. I think we also need to strengthen our background checks, and there needs to be longer wait times between a background check and when someone receives their weapon. And we need to make restrictions on violent offenders like domestic abusers. As a victim of domestic violence myself, I am so grateful that there was not a gun in the house anytime. How many of you have kids or grandkids? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you remember where you were during the Sandy Hook murders? When I saw that pop up on the news, my heart dropped and I wanted to go pick up my baby. I wanted to get her out of school and take her, even though it was, in another state, in another city. I wanted to go get her. And we need to make sure that our kids are protected, and that means making sure that a gun is never allowed in a school.
So these last several years have been really hard. It's been really difficult to watch the news, and not just because of the chaos that the Trump administration continues to wreak havoc on in terms of, every day it's something different. But, we all thought that we had reached a breaking point with Sandy Hook, right? And then we continue to see this stuff happen in Las Vegas, in Orlando at a nightclub, at a church when folks were praying, right? As someone who has a praying mother who goes to those Wednesday night Bible studies and Monday night prayers, you wonder, when is enough enough? When will elected officials at the state level, at the federal level, start to listen more to the citizens of this country and less at a special interest group, the NRA? And so it seems to be very common sense for me to say, absolutely, we have to do something. We have to reform our gun laws. But until we have a real movement and a real change of heart and mind, and continue to look at campaign finance and how and who we're listening to as elected officials, I don't know what else is left to happen if we can continue to see mass shootings of babies and church members and teenagers. Year after year, we will continue to see this until we really get serious about gun reforms and specifically look at these relationships between elected officials and the NRA.
Thank you. Safety first. That's what it comes down to. Safety first. There should be regulations, absolutely. There's too many deaths. There's too many innocent people that are dying, without a doubt. Felons should not be allowed. They should be denied access to guns. They should be denied the ability to get weapons. I do agree with the background checks. We all should be checked. If you have to be checked to go lease an apartment, they check your background. Why not check your background to see if you're sane enough to obtain a gun? If you've had any criminal history in your life, absolutely you should be checked. We all should be checked. This is not a partisan thing. Everyone should be checked, because anybody can snap at any given day. You don't have to have mental issues. You don't have to even have domestic issues. At one point, you can just snap in any day. And there should be some type of provision there made for people that step into those kind of things. So I believe the first thing, safety first. Secondly, regulations, regulate it. And there's a common sense, absolutely. Because those same guns that kill people are the same guns that stop bad people from doing their bad. So that's where it's at. Thank you.
You can keep the microphone, Ms. Hernandez, for the last question. What steps would you take to support the health and wellness of both old and young adults who want to age in place in the district?
That want to what again? I'm sorry?
Who would like to age in place in the district?
Age and place?
Age in place.
Oh, age
like
in
stay in the district and age in the district. I hope whoever's question that is correct.
I'm still not following you.
Staying in their homes and communities as they age.
You're asking, do I agree
What
with
steps would you take to support the health and wellness of older adults who would like to stay in the community, in the homes and the communities in which to age?
First of all, I support that. My father got cancer 5 years ago, and he chose to come home instead of going to hospice. And it meant everything for him to be surrounded by his family. So I totally agree with the citizens, and my daddy was 65 years old. So at that time, obviously, he was living with my mom. I believe it's important for senior citizens to have their home. That's where they're safe. That's where they've lived all their lives. 50 years here in Lansing have I lived here. I'd hate to be removed personally from my place of safety. Secondly, I believe that there should be some type of funding to help senior citizens keep their homes. A lot of them are on a fixed income. My mother, who worked for Michigan State University and retired, is on a fixed income. She only makes so much money. She has to have a second job to at least have some kind of income coming in. So I believe that there should be some kind of financial aid, some kind of funding, some kind of support to help. And my mom worked. She worked for 30 years, and she still is not making it. So I believe that there should be some kind of support for people that are over the age of 60 to help them keep their homes. Thank you.
Thank you for this question. This was something that we grappled with several years ago as my grandmother became increasingly ill. She lived in South Lansing, and we had to make some difficult decisions around that time, but she was a very independent woman, and she wanted to stay home. And so I think there's a number of things we can do. When I worked as a legislative assistant in the House of Representatives, there were several bills that we were thinking through and grappling with, specifically around elder abuse. We also wanted to make sure that there were high quality caregivers. So for individuals who wanted to stay in their home, what does it look like? What is the training and certifications for individuals who are caring for senior citizens, right? Or just going in to check on them and to make sure that they have access to resources. So I think we can take a look at that system, and also streamlining services for our senior citizens, right? So there are a number of services that are there, but oftentimes they are not streamlined and comprehensive for folks to really understand. So those are a couple of examples, because I do think that folks tend to do better, especially when it's their choice to stay in their homes. And so I think that that's something that we should absolutely be looking at the state level and also at the local level.
So I met a woman named Sean last week. I was knocking on doors, and she did something strange for her. She said, "Why don't you come in my home?" And I was kind of dumbfounded. They don't always ask you to come inside at the doors, as you might imagine. But she said, "I want you to meet my mother. She has had dementia for 20 years. My husband died 4 years ago after fighting cancer for 2 years, and he was the breadwinner. My child just graduated high school and is off to college, and I spend every waking moment taking care of my mother, who has dementia. And she's not getting paid for it. There's no assistance for her. She has been thrown around the system. She's asked elected officials who have sent her off to their assistants, who send them off to different organizations that haven't been able to help. And we need to make sure that people like Sean, who are taking care of their mother, taking care of their family member, that is a full-time job, and they need to be compensated for it. And we need to make sure that people that are willing to help their family and take care of their family and keep them in the home and make sure that they're comfortable and in a safe and comfortable living space are continuously taken care of. And if they don't have that support, we need to make sure that we can hire support that is going to be able to take care of them and make sure that we are fighting any kind of abuse left and right.
I think that we need to focus more and more on a patient-centered healthcare system as opposed to an institutional-centered healthcare system. Right now, too often, what happens, we have institutions that are front and center, and people kind of fit in to the institutional prerogative as opposed to having a system that has wraparound services and focuses on the patients. My mother is 92, and this year we finally had to put her in a nursing home. She has dementia, but as siblings, we worked a lot on ensuring that she could stay in her home where she wanted to, with increasing amounts of hours of care. I think in order to achieve that, we need to focus and think about training, and especially the wages that our healthcare workers make, like in-home healthcare workers, palliative care. They don't make very much money. If you look at what the aides are paid in nursing homes, for example, it's pretty atrocious. So I think that to have quality health care that's patient-centered, we need to increase our thoughtfulness about training and then investing in those workers through the work. And so we need to have in-home health care, transitional care, and then on, when necessary, to the nursing home, always focused on patient care that's patient-centered on the individual.
I believe we need to make education, housing, and healthcare affordable in order for us to keep our citizens. We need to raise minimum wage to $15 an hour. We need to end this attack on seniors, especially our teachers. This notion that we have to get rid of their pensions, eliminate Social Security, all of that must end in order for us to take care of our seniors and keep talent in Michigan. Thank you.
I kept my mother at home with me until she got to the point where her behaviors were such that she was a danger. She would leave the stove on, that kind of thing. And finally, the state of Michigan told me that if she did anything under my care, I could even possibly lose my nurse's license for neglect, that I had to have awake 24-hour care. My daughter, who's in the audience with us tonight, my whole entire family, we took care of my mother. And the thing about it is that she's in this nursing home that has had so many problems that I became an advocate for elderly people, and I started going around and talking to different people about these different problems. And I think my mom is on Medicaid, and I think she pays maybe $6,000 or $7,000 a month. What I would do is I would make it an alternative that people can keep their families at home instead of giving that money for these for-profit organizations where the bottom line is money. Give it to the family so that they can hire people to help them so that they have 24-hour care. And the caregivers get sick. Studies have been that people that don't get respite, they get sick. No one wants to put their family member in a nursing home, but sometimes you have to if they're climbing out the windows, if they're running away down the street. A lot of people, especially the males, they don't want to have to change their mom's undies. You know, it's a dignity thing. So that's what I would be doing. I would be looking at different ways to help keep the elderly people at home. Thank you.
Ms. Lorraine, you can keep the microphone. That concludes our question portion. So you have 2 minutes for your closing statement, and then you can pass the microphone down from there when you're finished.
Okay. Well, I spoke at a Black Lives Matter event not too long ago with several of the people on the panel, and a young man wrote to me and he said, I listened to you talk about your work in the juvenile justice system and mental health parity and all those things, but I didn't really get a good feeling of what you stood for. So I take responsibility for my campaign, and somehow I didn't get my message out there. So what I stand for is the new Green Deal of Michigan. The Green Party of Michigan has a platform that I think is the best platform of any party out there. We believe in the minimum wage should be $15 an hour. We believe in universal health care. We believe in ending these endless wars that all our money is going into war, when that money could be used here at home. We believe in grassroots democracy, and I believe all these things. And I think it's time that we get away from this situation where we're at that has been caused by just switching back and forth. Well, I'm going to vote for this person because this person's the lesser evil of that person. Well, I don't know. Evil is evil, the lesser of two evils, whatever, you know. And so I think we keep going back and forth trying the same old thing, and one party's going so far to the left and another party's going so far to the right, and nobody seems to want to come together and work on these issues. And then some of the things that have been passing that are bipartisan just blow me away. What we're doing to the veterans, blowing me away. If we can send somebody to war, when they come home, we should be able to take care of them, and we should be able to keep our veterans off the street. And where I live, I talk to a lot of homeless people who are vets, who have PTSD, And I've actually been helping them as a private citizen get hooked up with the VA, get hooked up with the services they need, and thanking them for going over there and basically having their lives ruined and then coming back to very little help. So that's what I stand for. I think that in this country of ours, we have the greatest country. We shouldn't have people sleeping on the streets. And I believe in helping people get up on their feet. Thank you.
I would like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. My parents fled their home country, Somalia, due to the civil war. Then they moved to Kenya, and that's where I was born. I came here when I was 10 years old, and everything has been an experience. I know what's like to be poor. I know what it's like to feel defenseless. I know what it's like to not have a voice, because I never had that. My family never had that. And for me, this is a call. And you know, I don't care about the title of the job, the money that this job offers. For me, it's doing the right thing. And I funded my own campaign. I work a lot of hours at work. I'm all about doing the right thing. And if I'm elected, I will represent all of you guys. You know, I don't owe nobody any favors. I rejected all donations. I owe no one anything. So I look forward to working for all of you guys. Thank you.
I served as a state representative between 1998 and 2002, and I was struck during that time how we had I think our whole legislature had our priorities mixed up. Oftentimes when we had a proposal, the question was, well, does the governor support this? Or do the people who are funding our caucus support this? But I think that what we need to do is think more about the prism of human dignity. So when you have a proposal, the question is, does this proposal enhance or detract from human dignity? We are, in fact, inherently interconnected. And that means that we are morally obligated to care. Just because my children had a good education doesn't mean I can stop caring about other children who don't have a good quality education or don't have access to health care. Or just because I may have a well-paying job, I need to think about and care about people who are working 2 jobs at minimum wage. I'd like to focus as a legislator on a couple of areas. One, as we talked about, the hollowing out of the middle class. Number 2, the opioid crisis. You know, last year in the United States, we lost more people to overdose than we lost during the entire war in Vietnam. That's a shocking statistic, but true. And then I'd like to help reform the criminal justice system. I'd like to abolish the for-profit bail system. Other states have done that. And if you're not a threat to society, you go home instead of being incarcerated even though you've not been convicted of anything. I'd like to have a statute of limitations on the requirement that we have in Michigan for the rest of our lives. If you're a felon, now for the rest of your life, you have to check that box when you're trying to apply for a job. And that is just nothing but an albatross around your neck. So we need to have a statute of limitations on that. And last thing I would say is better a government that makes an occasional mistake while striving to do good than a government that's frozen in the ice of its own indifference.
Thank you again, everyone, for coming out tonight, and for everyone that put this together. It's been a great experience. My biggest pet peeve is having representatives that don't represent us, but instead represent special interest groups and corporations. As someone who's been homeless in my life as a child and as a young mom, as somebody who has struggled to get by, who's had to live in the in-between, you know, when you just don't make enough to get any help, but you make too much to you make too much to get any help, but you don't make little enough to actually survive. It's really frustrating to see so many representatives out there that are climbing a ladder. You know, this is like their goal in life is to climb that political ladder. So every job is a new job. I care about the issues on the state level because they have affected me and my family and so many people around me for so long. And I identify with so many of the struggles that we see here in Lansing. I want to make sure that every single person has health care. I want to make sure that every single person has access to a living wage. I want to make sure that we are reforming our criminal justice system, and that means treating mental health issues as mental health issues, not criminal justice issues. I want to make sure that the people that we elect are people that are actually going to represent us and the issues that we care about. And I'm not taking any support or money from any kind of special interest groups because I care about the people. So if you are interested in getting involved or finding out more about my campaign, you can go to votecollison.com, or I would love to chat with any of you later. Thanks.
Thank you all again for coming and for inviting me to be a part of this forum. It's definitely been, I think, illuminating and has hopefully showed areas that we have in common and also some places that we differ. I was born and raised in Lansing, and after I graduated from high school, went off to college, I immediately came back to Lansing for one reason, and that was to serve Lansing, because this community has invested so much into me. I started off as a community organizer, worked as a legislative assistant in the House of Representatives, and in 2012, the people of Lansing voted for me to represent them and use my voice at the county commission to fight for Lansing. And so I've been doing just that. I've been rolling up my sleeves to expand healthcare, to make Ingham County a welcoming community, to make sure that working families have a voice and that we continue to expand services and resources for people. That's what I want to do at the state capitol, because we need voices that are from Lansing that will be unapologetically focused on pushing a progressive agenda for Lansing families. It's not enough just to talk about it. We have to be about this work. The issues are too important at the state level. Just a month and a half, 2 months ago, they got rid of prevailing wage. That helps working families, construction workers who are trying to make ends meet. They put a work requirement on Medicaid. So people who are ill actually have to check a box and say, I have to work a certain number of hours. These issues are too real for us just to talk about it. We have to be about the work. I've been about the work for the last 15 years, and I want to continue to take that service from Lansing over to the state capitol. So you can learn more about the movement that we're trying to build, the work that we've already done, and the work we want to continue to do to fight for Lansing families at votesarahanthony.com. Again, I will always be here for Lansing. It's the community that raised me and continues to mold me and shape my perspective. So again, my name is Sarah Anthony, and I hope I can earn your support or continue to have a conversation about ways we can advance Lansing. God bless.
Thank you. Along with the rest of the panel, and I would venture to say that we all know that change is needed. Many of us, I would say all of us, are here for that very reason. And I know personally that I've lived here all my life, raised my children in the school district, and not only have I seen the things and heard things that are not right, and I would agree with the young man that said things need to be done right. And that's basically what it is. I'm not a politician. And I think, honestly, that's a good thing. I'm here about my values, my family, and my community. And that's why I'm here. I'm a chaplain for the Lansing Police Department. I've served as a pastor for 12 years. I sit on the Mayor's Advisory Board. I sit on the Mayor's Parks and Rec Board. I've been in the city. I know how it works. And I realize that now is the time. And I don't only welcome your vote, but I welcome your prayers and your support, because we all need it. Our state needs prayer. We need help. And I do believe in divine help. So I ask you even now, and I thank you for your time, and I ask you to continue praying not only just for us, but for those that are leading us as a nation. If we go back to why we're here, it's in God we trust. And that's just the truth. And it's God that is helping us, and it's God that's going to get us through. No man, I don't have all the answers, just let me tell you that right now. And honestly, any of us don't either. We need the help. And I welcome the help. And I thank you for your support.
Okay, that concludes tonight's forum for the 68th House District. Let's give our candidates a round of applause. And then just a couple of acknowledgments. The League of Women Voters, ACLU, NAACP, and Represent Us would like to thank the candidates for their participation and the City of Lansing for the use of this site and for their hospitality. Also, we'd like to acknowledge Action of Greater Lansing for contributing light refreshments, and I believe there is an announcement that needs to be made.
Yes, I have a brief announcement. This Friday, July 20th at 6 p.m. at the Union Missionary Baptist Church on MLK Boulevard, the NAACP Lansing is going to be presenting the 8th District Meet the Candidates Forum. It's going to be featuring Democratic candidates Alyssa Slotkin and Chris Smith. The other candidates were also invited, but they did not respond. Light refreshments will be served. I have met and spent time with both Alyssa and Chris. They both have very compelling stories. I urge you to come out and hear what they have to say. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Monica Zahusky. For those of you who don't know, I work for the Lansing City Clerk. I figured it's only fitting you began with Chris and then you get to end with me. I want to thank all of the groups that helped co-sponsor the event this evening, and we were very happy to help make it possible. I do want to remind folks, 1, to vote. 2, if you vote absentee, you have until 8 p.m. on election night to get those ballots in. 3, if any of you are so inclined, and we would welcome you, the deadline to file to run for the Lansing School Board or the Lansing Community College Board of Trustees is next week, Tuesday, the 24th at 4 p.m. You file for LCC with the county clerk and the Lansing School Board with us at the Lansing City Clerk's office downtown. So if any of you are so inclined or even thinking about it, please, please, please let us know. Thank you very much for coming. Next week, voting or filing? Voting is Tuesday, August 7th, 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. And you vote at your polling place. If you vote absentee, you have until the day before the election to vote to get a new absentee ballot. Thank you very much.